From Williamsburg, Jayne Barnard, who's a friend, a colleague, and an amazing person as well. So thank you very much for being here, Jayne.
And a constituent.
And a constituent.
I'm here, even shorter than everybody else, to speak on behalf of Virginians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And I'm proud to be able to do that as its board vice president. I'm sorry that our board president is not able to be here. She just had a baby. It was too far and too complicated. So I am honored to speak in her stead. 30 years ago, in 1991, the Virginia Death Chamber was moved to this site, as the governor mentioned, from Richmond. 101 people were put to death in this facility. 100 men and 1 woman. Later, the same year, 1991, the founders of what is now VADP took their first steps toward ending state-sponsored killing. The steps were slow, the steps were arduous, but our journey at VADP is now over, thanks to many people who have supported us in many ways over these 30 years. I want to begin by acknowledging the essential role of Marie Deans in founding Virginia's death penalty abolition movement. Her work as a volunteer on death row in the bad old days resulted in the exoneration of Earl Washington. Her work to get attorneys to represent the men on death row saved lives and helped to humanize a brutal, awful environment. She was also a key figure in the creation of this organization. Virginia's faith community was the backbone of the early abolition movement. Religious leaders like Bishop Walter F. Sullivan, Reverend Fletcher Lowe, and many others spoke out publicly in opposition to the death penalty and provided spiritual comfort to those on death row and their family members. Local religious leaders all over the Commonwealth led execution vigils in their communities, and their communities provided crucial funding in the early years of VADP. We had other and have other allies, and I'm glad to see that several of our strongest allies are here, and I want to highlight their presence again. The Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. There you go. The Virginia Catholic Conference. And the Virginia ACLU. Together, we were able to accomplish what none of us could have done alone. Now, it would be impossible to discuss even the possibility of death penalty abolition if it were not for the extraordinary work of the Capitol Defense Attorneys. Before and after 2002, we know the General Assembly created the Capitol Representational Centers in 2002, and since then, the work and the successes of the attorneys have been remarkable. Attorneys, mitigation specialists, investigators, all have worked together. People like David Bruck, Jerry Zirkin, Rob Lee, and many others have represented indigent defendants accused of capital crimes for almost 20 years, and that work has come or will come to an end. But before we leave those professionals, We should note that they were responsible for a 90% decrease in death sentences during the 20 years they did their work. And no one in Virginia has been sentenced to death in the past 10 years. Another key group of advocates for death penalty abolition has been murder victim family members. People like Rachel Sutphin and Linnell Patterson and others. These courageous women and men have shared their intensely personal stories of loved ones lost and gone in order to educate the public, in order to educate members of the General Assembly, in order to let people know that the death penalty often fails victims and their families. Many of these victim advocates became opponents of the death penalty because of their own negative and sometimes traumatic experiences with the criminal justice system that they felt was more interested in retribution than in meeting their personal needs. And the abolition of the death penalty will make it possible to serve more effectively the needs of victims with resources that heretofore have been allocated to expensive trials, expensive appeals. That will now be able to be redirected. And another group that has helped us get where we are at this moment. Powerful floor testimony by legislators themselves who had lost loved ones to homicide helped secure the final votes. All 7 of the murder victim family members who serve in the General Assembly, 7, all 7 of them voted to end capital punishment. And finally, of course, we've heard the story, we know the story. What got us to the finish line were the people who had the votes and the governor who led them. We are very grateful to Senator Surville, to Delegate Mulling. They worked long and hard publicly and privately to move this issue forward, and we are most immensely grateful to Governor Northam, who himself, publicly and behind the scenes, made this outcome possible. This is, as we know, a historic day for Virginia. We are the first Southern state to abolish capital punishment, but we will not be the last.